So good evening, everybody. Welcome. So for those that are watching online tonight, Venerable Children is still traveling in Europe and Russia. And so tonight, instead of doing the usual review on the Gomchen Lamrim, which we are studying, we're starting a retreat this weekend on kindness. So we'll talk about that tonight. And then next week we'll resume the reviews on the Gomchen. So let's begin with our motivation. So think for a minute, what motivated you to come to the Abbey this weekend? And those that are watching online, what motivated you to tune in tonight? I think often, we seek many different ways to find peace of mind. And we somehow know in our heart that it's possible to find ease and contentment and peace. But we're often just not so clear on how to get that peace. So this weekend we'll explore that possibility, drawing on the wisdom of the Buddha. And since the Buddha was able to find that peace and lead others to that same state, well, let's expand our motivation so that as we learn how to create peace in our own hearts, we can extend that out to all living beings. And so then our activities this weekend are for the benefit of all. So welcome, everybody. So nice to see some familiar faces and some new folks. Welcome to the Abbey. So I thought tonight to start a little bit with some overview. There's many people here tonight that are new to Buddhism, so I thought to just talk a little bit about how we think and how we view life from a Buddhist perspective. Just a little overview. And then some thoughts about meditation and then some information about kindness and empathy, love, compassion, and altruism. These are all things that if we practice, we can find some peace of mind and happiness. I think often, mostly what we think about is that if just people were kinder, then many of our problems would be solved. Does that sound familiar? That's how I often think. Focusing on how others can change is a usual approach to trying to find happiness. And of course, this is a very fundamental wish for all of us. The Dalai Lama says that all living beings want happiness and don't want suffering. And that's certainly true for me, and I'm imagining that's true for everyone here. Because we all have that wish, it connects us to every other living being in terms of being all alike in this fundamental way. That's helpful to remember, actually, that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. And at least for me, often my actions in the day are focused on me getting my happiness. And as we study the Buddhist teachings a bit, we start questioning the wisdom of that. Of course, we're conditioned in this society, especially Western society, to think if I get everything I need and everything I want, then I'll be happy. And so there's no reason really to feel bad about having that thought. It's just the conditions that we absorb really from this society. But we can see this focus in the media today also. The media focuses on very selfish motivations, even esteeming this way of behaving, climb the corporate ladder, push others out of the way to get what you want, kind of dog eat dog kind of way, But if we really start thinking about it and about our experience, actually, our existence here is really woven from deeds of cooperation and friendship, affection and care. And yet that's not so much focused on. So we're really influenced by this perspective of kind of do whatever you can to get what you want and really just think about yourself. But the important question comes up, does this way of focusing on my happiness while remaining indifferent to others bring the happiness I'm looking for? That's really the fundamental question. And when I think about the times in my life that I've been just focusing on just me and what I need or want, I don't often really get what I'm thinking I'm going to. I don't feel so happy. And so this kind of questioning, thinking about what leads to happiness, really leads us to the Buddha's teachings, because he also had this question, what brings happiness in this existence? And can we transcend the difficulties that we experience here? And so he began searching for what brings a deep, lasting happiness. And the method that he used to figure this out was meditation. And so in Venerable Chodron's book, Buddhism for Beginners, she has a section on what meditation is, and it's really clearly written, so I thought to read that. So she says, meditation is a mental activity. Even if the body is in perfect position, if our mind is running wild, thinking about objects of attachment or anger, we're not meditating. Meditation is also not a concentrated state, such as we may have when painting or reading or doing an activity that interests us. Nor is it simply being aware of what we are doing at any particular moment. So the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, G-O-M. This has the same verbal root as to habituate or to familiarize. So meditation means habituating ourselves to constructive, realistic, and beneficial emotions and attitudes. It builds up good habits of the mind. And so meditation is used to transform our thoughts and views so that they are more kinder and correspond to reality. And so this weekend we have an opportunity to practice some meditation and to learn about ways of thinking that will bring some ease to our mind, ways that we can work with the thoughts that come up in the mind. And then over time, we start transforming our minds and start thinking differently and then behaving differently due to that. And so, what is happiness? Happiness is a mental experience that can accompany either a physical cognition, like seeing something, or a mental cognition, thinking about someone or something. And it's not so much we like what we see or think, rather we like how we feel while seeing or thinking. It's a mental state. And we often think in terms of happy or unhappy. We think in terms of extremes. At least I often do, either, all pumped up and a huge smile and everything's great, or, depressed, disappointed, it didn't work out like I wanted, so way to the other side. But really our experience is in every moment, all sorts of things are happening, and these experiences come from millions of causes and conditions that all come together. So we can think about that right now. So, what did it take for you to get here? Think of all the causes and conditions. You probably started even planning this quite a while ago, I would imagine. Yeah, because busy lives, many responsibilities, Many, many things had to come together. And then that you came here, well, many things had to come together here, We had to build a monastery here so you could come. Have some people dressed in these robes and live here. So many, many things had to come together. So we take in the information of what is happening either around us or just in our minds, and while this is happening, we experience it with varying levels of happiness and unhappiness. We often describe this phenomena in terms of the mood we're in, a good mood or a bad mood. And when we think of life, it goes up and down all the time, doesn't it? We have all these plans and think about ways things are going to roll out and be, and that's not what ends up happening. And, we are pleasantly surprised, or we are shocked about what ends up happening, and everything in between. And the mood we're in also doesn't always correspond to the information that we're taking in, what's going on around us and what we're doing. So for instance, we might be doing something we normally like, but we're in a bad mood, so we're not happy and we don't enjoy it. Has anybody ever had that one? Yeah, that's kind of a common one, I think. Yeah. Or we could be doing something that's really difficult, but we're in a really good mood and we just really enjoy it, and so it's no problem at all. So it's interesting to look at our moods, that they don't always correspond with what we're actually doing. And as we experience each moment, we always have a certain attitude towards it. And an attitude is simply how we regard something. There are so many different types of attitudes we can have. And depending on that attitude, it very much affects the mood that we're in. And in normal circumstances, there's really not much we can really do to change these up and downs that we experience all the time in life. They just manifest, it just comes. But the thing that we can work with, however, always, is our attitude. So we can approach it two different ways. We can work to stop the non-productive attitudes that bring us misery. And the other way is to train ourselves to have more productive ways of looking at things. And so this weekend, as we practice some meditation, kind of the general way is that we first hear teachings that come from a reliable source, so from the Buddha. And then after listening to them, we deepen our understanding by thinking about them. So that's one of the reasons why we have some silence here, because it's kind of hard to think about things that we've heard if we're, talking to a person that we just met and, going on and on about this and that. So it really helps to have some silence so we can kind of bring our senses inward and think about the things that we're hearing. And then after listening to them, we think about them, and then through meditation, we start to integrate what we have learned with our mind. And so we can investigate kindness and some other things this weekend. what it means, the benefits of developing this form of caring and how it affects ourselves and others. Then we can learn ways to train ourselves to further develop kindness and our other qualities, empathy, love, compassion, altruism, bodhicitta. And then over time, then, this starts becoming part of our being, who we are. And this is really the process of meditation. So just from that description, it's pretty clear to see that it's not something that's going to happen like with a snap of a finger. It's going to take some time and some practice. So it's helpful not to get an expectation that's a bit unrealistic. But whatever we take away from whatever we hear this weekend, if we continue to think about it and meditate on it and practice it, there is no way that we cannot change. We all will change. That's the nature of this path. Mm-hmm. And there's many very intelligent people here that live here. And you know, if this path didn't work, we'd probably walk down the hill, you know, and dress up like you all are dressing. But it works. So we understand the benefit of it. So there's two general types of meditation, stabilizing and analytical. So stabilizing meditation is designed to help develop concentration, and analytical to develop understanding and insight. These are two very broad categories, and the Buddha taught a wide variety of meditation techniques. So a common example of stabilizing meditation that you've probably heard about or do is focus the mind on the breath and observe all the sensations that occur as we breathe. This calms our mind, frees it from its usual chatter over time, and it enables us to be more peaceful in our daily life and not to worry so much. Again, it's not automatic. And why is that? That's because in this existence that we have here, we're pretty much focused on things outward. If you think about your day, what you did today, you're focusing on, you know, the senses and what's going on around. And so when we start meditating and bring our attention inward, we kind of get a big shock because we start listening to all the chatter that goes on in the mind. And there's a lot of it. It's very busy. But if we're busy outwardly focused all the time, we don't really recognize it. So that's the first thing that happens when we meditate, is we start realizing just how uncontrolled the thoughts are and how busy the mind is. But if we keep meditating, then the mind will start calming down, and then we can start using it. And there isn't anything more powerful in this universe than the mind. Nothing. Nothing. We can also use the visualized image of the Buddha as an object to help stabilize our mind and develop concentration. And this has the added benefit of being a very virtuous object, and then we can create a lot of merit doing this. It's very virtuous. It's very powerful. Some non-Buddhist traditions that do meditation suggest looking at a flower or candle to develop concentration. In our tradition, we don't use that. And the reason is because meditation is an activity of our mental, not our sense consciousness. So we don't use our eyes, or we use our mind. And then other meditations, the analytical ones, we can use to help us control our different emotions that bring misery, or different ways of thinking that bring difficulties for us, our anger, our attachment, our jealousy, and help us to develop more positive and realistic attitudes. And so that's just a very brief overview about meditation. And then also it's helpful to reflect on the kind of mind we bring to meditation, what our perspective is. It's helpful to see how we're influenced or conditioned in this life. And again, like I said a minute ago, we are so conditioned to look outside of ourselves for happiness. Yeah. And we can just think about the media, you know, all the commercials that we hear. The mega message of all of those commercials is if you just will get this thing out here, then you will find your happiness. You will find some contentment. You will finally be satisfied. You'll get what you want. And when we think about that, is that really true? It has not been true in my life, and I worked very hard at that for many years. I worked very hard to get many things, but that was not my experience. And so when I'm talking about these different things, you know, the other thing that the Buddha taught early on was he said, don't take what I'm saying with blind faith. Take it in, think about it, and then see if it matches your own experience. That's very important, yeah? So you have a very active part in this, yeah? Very active part in this. So we can think about, you know, this conditioning that we have that if we get certain things or get this or that or get the right person or the right car or the right job or the right, you know, whatever it is, that we're going to have a lot of happiness, a lot of contentment. It doesn't seem to come out that way. And why is that? Mostly it's because when we get kind of, you know, hooked on something, grasping something, we start exaggerating the qualities of it. You know, you can think about, let's see, like when I bought my first new car, not a used one, a new one, you know, looked at all the pictures, thought about it, talked to people, went online, looked at all the specs, started to go to different car lots and look at them. What's the color? What's the, you know, all this stuff, on and on and on. You know, it kind of consumed my mind, actually. It was just in there all the time, you know, So then, you know, I finally purchase it. And, you know, it feels okay for a brief amount of time, I will say. And then, you know, I drive to work and I park somewhere and then I come out from work and then I look and there's a big, you know, dent in the driver's side of the door. You know, somebody smacked into it. Huge disappointment, you know. So the disappointment is as big as the exaggeration that I created in my mind, yeah? Thinking that it's going to, you know, bring everything that I'm needing. So I think we do that with many things. We do that with people. Yeah. In Buddhism, we call that attachment. And the other side of that coin is aversion. So, you know, we get this disappointment, or we even go further and get irritated or, you know, angry or rageful because of our expectation is dashed, yeah. And so because we've exaggerated the quality of whatever it is, there's no way that it can provide what we've imagined in our mind. It's impossible. So we just are setting ourselves up for the disappointment. And we, of course, think the happiness is in the object. Yet it's our mind that has defined the object. And so then, what's our reaction to this whole sequence? We start looking for the next thing, don't we? Yeah. And so we do the same thing again. Oh, this thing, yeah. Exaggerate its qualities, figure out how to get it, Get it, enjoy it for a little bit, and then start feeling the disappointment or the discontent of that. And we really repeat that process again and again in our life, often. At least I did. I don't know, am I the only one that's done this? Is this resonating? This sounds familiar? Huh? Still doing, yeah. And so in Buddhism, we believe that we have experienced this pattern in past lives, and that if we don't transform our thinking and our behavior, we will be experiencing this disappointment and dissatisfaction over and over again in future lives. And so this is why we call this cyclic existence, or the other term is samsara. Now the Buddha found a way out of this cyclic existence, the cycling existence. And when we read about his experience and how he transformed, we start getting an idea of what each one of us has as a potential, what we could actually do if we aren't just hooked to all of these sense things on the outside that bring fleeting pleasure and are quickly gone. And this is important, not only in this life, but this is important at the time of death. If I don't work at transforming this way of relating to my existence, my death experience is not going to be so wonderful, because I'm going to be grasping after this life and this body and all of these fleeting pleasures. And we don't have to settle for that. We don't have to settle for that. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't enjoy anything. It doesn't mean that. I can enjoy anything in this world. My practice is about not getting attached to it, not exaggerate the qualities of it, so I see it for what it actually is. Enjoy it in the moment, and then let it go. If I do it that way, then I don't have the big buzz of anticipation, and then I don't have the fall of disappointment. That frees up a ton of energy, a ton of energy. That then I can use to develop my good qualities, work on those habits that I have that aren't so helpful to myself and others. So it really frees us from the bondage of being tied to all of these objects on the outside in this distorted way. And again, there's nothing wrong with enjoying anything. That's not what we're talking about here, yeah? This isn't about, giving away everything and going to live in a hut in the forest with, a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. That's not what we're talking about here at all. So this weekend we'll be focusing on kindness, what it is, how practicing it can bring peace and joy to ourselves and others. So if we think about kindness, that's kind of a general term, but what is it? So it's an attitude. It's an attitude of mind. It's a form of caring, warm-hearted consideration that is manifested in the way that we behave toward others. Every one of us know about kindness. We have been the recipients of it, and we know how to offer it to others. Kindness is a very helpful attitude because we can use it as a basis for developing love, compassion, and altruism, or bodhicitta. And that's important because these are the states of mind that bring happiness to not only ourselves, but those around us. So in Buddhism, love is the wish for all living beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. That's a little different than what we're conditioned for in this society usually. Usually we think of love as we fall in love and what can that person give me so that I can be happy. So it's a little upside down, that one. You know? So love is the wish for all living beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And then compassion is the wish for all living beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And when we develop these qualities, then we can turn our mind to bodhicitta, or altruism is kind of the secular term, I guess. So bodhicitta, it's a Sanskrit term, and citta means heart, mind. So when we think about heart and mind, we don't really separate those too much. We think about them kind of in the same way. I think about it this way, that, I have many thoughts and attitudes and emotions, and if I can run those through my heart, then that's going to be an experience that can be quite rich. If I just stay in logical head and analytic head, and I don't engage my heart, then that's a different kind of experience. And we all know about that. We know when somebody talks to us with their head. We know what that feels like. And we know when somebody talks to us with their heart. We understand what that feels like. So we can really develop this quality of bringing everything through our heart. So citta means heart, mind. And then bodhi means highest growth. So getting rid of all obstacles by removing all disturbing emotions and afflictions. This is what the Buddha did. So think about that for a minute. Having a day where you had no irritation, no judgment, no criticism, no anger, no jealousy, no craving after things. Think about the energy. It's no wonder they can walk through walls. Think about the energy that you could have if you weren't burdened down with that kind of mind, huh? Bodhi also means that we have all the factors within ourselves right now. We just need to develop them. Every one of us has the potential to transform the way that we think and then act by working on our minds, by using the path that the Buddha laid out. So we can become just like the Buddha. It takes some time. But even on the journey, after a bit of time, it's quite lovely. Even when it's difficult, it's still lovely. Because there's more satisfaction, there's more peace of mind. The mind isn't disturbed as much. When it is disturbed, we can turn that mind quicker. So many beneficial results from practicing. And so this is what the Buddha accomplished, and then that's what he taught. And so it's been around for 2,600 years. Things that last for a long time usually have some pretty good benefit, In our Buddhist practice, there's an emphasis placed on motivation or intention behind the action we do. So our motivations or intentions are what color our actions. It's what leads us in a particular direction. Now, if we haven't done much meditation and our minds are pretty busy, we're not even aware of our intention. We can't really capture it yet often. But after some practice, not too long, some practice, then we can start recognizing what our intention is. And that's very helpful, because if our intention is quite selfish and it's going to be harmful, we can interrupt it. We cannot follow it. Mm-hmm. And if our intention is filled with love and kindness and generosity, then we can kind of not only recognize it, but kind of fuel it, pump it up a bit, and feel happy about it and rejoice in that. Mm-hmm. So motivations are very powerful, very powerful. And whether, like I say, whether they're well-meaning and kind or negative or neutral, they influence our actions. And it's interesting to think, we can't distinguish kind behavior from selfish behavior just by the appearance of an action. So think about it. If a mother is walking on the street with her young child and she suddenly pushes her child to the side of the street to prevent it from being run over by a car, her action is violent in appearance, isn't it? It really is. If you didn't see the car or something and you just saw the mother pushing the kid, it would look very violent. Yeah? But her motivation, of course, was to protect her child. And then if someone approaches you with a big smile, showers you with compliments, and, but their motivation is to swindle you, when you look at that behavior on the outside, looks quite wonderful. But the motivation, not so good. Yeah. So in every circumstance, it's possible for us to examine our motivation and to do the best to see where they come from, and to see if they come from kind of a self-centered attitude. We all have this self-centered attitude where I come first, because we're conditioned to that. The important thing about self-centered attitude is to remember that it isn't part of who I am. It's the analogy that they use. It's kind of like the blue sky up above. Like we can have a very cloudy day, but the blue sky is still up there. That blue sky is our Buddha potential, who we can become, the pureness of ourselves. But we've got this cloud cover, which is this self-centered attitude that wants to get in the way and, get what we want. Yeah. So we can recognize this self-centered attitude and we can interrupt it. Mm-hmm. And what helps us also to interrupt it is if we run with that, we have some misery often, It doesn't feel so wonderful. And so that gets our attention. That's actually usually what brings us to, a spiritual practice. I'd like to have some peace here. I'd like to have some, much more capacity to be kind and considerate and non-harmful. So valuing others and being concerned about their situation is really a wonderful way to live. When we have this attitude, we feel kindness toward others, and it's translated into a very open-minded and willingness to care for others. And this kind of attitude is very vast, a very vast perspective then. And again, we can think about it if we kind of connect with our heart, like we can see everybody in this room all has the same kind of idea about wanting to increase their kindness. That's really wonderful. That touches my heart. Everybody in here is wanting to do that. Doesn't that touch your heart? This is a very safe place now. We all are having the same kind of idea. Now we can develop that kind of feeling to every living being we meet. We have that capacity, each one of us. We have to start with ourselves, though. We're often pretty harsh on ourselves. Not so kind. The chatter in the mind is pretty critical. Again, at least that's my experience. Maybe that's not true for y'all. That's my experience. And so I have to turn that first. Because if I don't turn that, I sure won't know how to extend some kindness to someone else. That's why this path is so wonderful, because it starts with me. I have to work in here. It isn't about what anybody else is doing around me. It's about in here. And how many times have we tried to change the others? If I had even a dime for every time I tried this, I would have a lot of money. Huh? Did it ever work? Raise your hand if that worked. No, it doesn't work. So we can see that conditioning, we keep doing it again and again and again and again. So we start learning a different way to try and relate. Let me look here, and let me quit looking out there a little bit. What can I learn about what's going on in here? And the very interesting thing that happens is I start looking here and start changing how I'm acting here. And you know what happens? It starts affecting those around me. And they start changing. It's so interesting. So interesting how that works. We know from our experience that it's possible to develop a very kind heart, to be very compassionate and have a lot of love and think about benefiting others. There's many people in this world that have done that, yeah? His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, many people. You know people in your own life that live that way. Huh? So our ability to offer kindness and compassion is underdeveloped. It's not like we're bad people, It's just underdeveloped, that's all. Why? Because we're conditioned in this other way. We're conditioned to look outward. We're conditioned to think about happiness being outside of ourselves. So we don't practice so much the internal development of our own good qualities. We often don't even recognize them. Oftentimes we don't even think we have any, which is not true, of course. We can see, too, just through evolution, we know that we have an instinct to care for children and those close to us, and generally whoever treats us with kindness. And this is natural altruism. It's innate. Doesn't require any training. We all have that ability. If a young, like a little toddler, ran into this room, you know how they run and their momentum gets faster than their little legs and they fall. Every one of us, if we saw that happening right here, we'd reach up, wouldn't we? We'd get, we'd want to help. Every one of us. Nobody would look away, So we all have this kindness, every one of us. Most of our kindness, though, is a bit limited and partial. So it's towards those that are around us. And that's good. But let's increase that to all beings. That would bring so much more happiness to ourselves and to others. Huh? And so how can we develop this capability? So it begins with deeply looking inside, connecting with the thought that I don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer. Now, when I really get that, when I'm really convinced about that, yes, that's true. I don't want to suffer. What happens then if I mentally project myself into the awareness of another being? Like me, they're under the sway of all kinds of torments and great mental confusion, just like I am. But like me, wouldn't they too prefer, if possible, to not suffer? They share my same desire to escape suffering. And this wish is worthy of some respect. Every living being has it. When I'm out walking and I step right next to an ant, it runs away very quickly. It does not want to suffer. It doesn't matter what the being is. Every living being. Now, how we go about trying not to suffer depends on our conditioning. If we come from an environment that is harsh and punitive and punishing, then that's kind of how we try to not suffer. That's what we bring forward. Mm-hmm. So we're just, come to however we react to what's going on through our conditioning. Again, there's nothing to feel bad about. That's just what is. But we can transform it. We can turn it if it isn't working for us. So developing our kindness, compassion, and altruism is developed through our meditation practice. That's a big part of how we do this. Now, there's many ways that we can approach kindness. Simply as a caring attitude that can be developed into loving kindness, that's one way. And if we look at it this way, then loving kindness and compassion then are two aspects of altruism, or bodhicitta. So altruism refers to a quality possessed by people whose focus is on something other than themselves. Their intention is to act for others' welfare, having more consideration for the well-being of others. Martin Luther King was a good example of this. He wrote, "Every person must decide whether they will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness." So loving kindness wants all living beings to experience happiness. And compassion focuses on removing their suffering. So now empathy has a part in this also, as it alerts us to the nature and intensity of suffering experienced by another. So empathy can be set off by an affective or emotional perception of feeling for another, or by cognitive imagination of their experience. So when we have this emotional or affective empathy, that occurs when we enter into a resonance with the situation and the feelings of another person, with the emotions that are being shown by that person's facial expressions, gaze, tone of voice, body language, and behavior. So, we're in the kitchen cooking and somebody's chopping vegetables next to us and all of a sudden they cut their finger. I feel that. Yeah, as living beings, we feel that. So we go into a resonance with their experience. The cognitive dimension of empathy occurs by mentally evoking an experience lived by another person, either by imagining what the other person is feeling, or the way the experience affects the person, or by imagining what we would feel in the same situation. Or perhaps we've had that similar experience in our life before. So much research has been carried out studying empathy and compassion and love. And it's interesting and helpful to kind of look at this a little bit. So the brain, or the cerebral networks activated by meditation on compassion, are very, very different than those linked to empathy. So when we see someone suffering, we also suffer. A part of the brain associated with pain is activated when we observe someone suffering. So this explains why it's actually painful to observe someone suffering. Now, the interesting point is that when meditating on love and compassion, the cerebral networks activated are very different. So the networks linked to negative emotions and distress are not activated during meditation on compassion or love. But areas associated with positive emotions are joy, contentment, gratitude, inspiration. So this is important because if we react with empathy to suffering without consciously moving our mind to compassion and love, then we have a very painful experience, and over time we can experience burnout. So this empathic resonance, when it's repeated many times, leads to emotional exhaustion and distress. In the US, a study showed that 60% of medical professionals, 60% of the medical profession suffers or has suffered from burnout, and that a third has been affected to the point of taking leave from work or leaving the profession altogether. So it seems like what we traditionally call compassion fatigue is really empathy fatigue. Because compassion reinforces our strength of mind, our inner balance, our courageous, loving determination to help those who suffer. So love and compassion do not get exhausted and do not make us weary or worn out, but helps us to overcome empathy fatigue. And then too, we know that emotions and mental states have a contagious effect. You know, if you've ever been in a big crowd and somebody gets freaked out or someone falls or something happens or an alarm goes off, you can just feel the energy of, I got to get out of here because, people are going to start running or something, So our emotional state is very contagious. So if someone is in the presence of a suffering person and is feeling overwhelming distress, then that only exaggerates and aggravates the mental discomfort of the person suffering. On the other hand, though, if the person who comes to help is radiating kindness, gives off peaceful calm, and could be attentive to the other, then there's no doubt that the person would be comforted by that attitude. And we've all had that experience. Compassion and altruistic love have a warm, loving, and positive aspect that empathy alone for the suffering of another doesn't have. Love and compassion bring a constructive quality to approaching others' suffering and strengthens a resolve to help those who are suffering. So there's been a lot of research done on this, and there was some research done back in 2013 by a researcher named Singer and Bolz, B-O-L-Z. They carried out a week-long training program with novice subjects who practiced meditations on altruistic love and on empathy. So Singer and her colleagues divided subjects into two groups. One meditated on love and compassion, while the other worked only on empathy. The first result showed that after a week of meditations oriented toward altruistic love and compassion, these novice subjects, people had never meditated before, reacted to video clips showing suffering people with constructive mental states like courage and a determination to find a way to help, versus any negative mental states, which would stimulate, distress, aversion, discouragement, or avoidance. Just after a week. That's kind of astounding, isn't it? So they were able to approach a difficult situation with love and compassion and show some resilience when faced with someone else's pain. Then the other group, subjects devoted a week to cultivating empathy alone and entering really into effective resonance with others' sufferings. They continued to associate their empathic response with negative values and showed an increased perception of their own suffering, sometimes to the point of not being able to control their emotions. For these subjects, negative effects increased when they watched videos showing scenes of suffering. The group of participants also experienced more negative feelings toward ordinary everyday scenes, which showed that training in empathic resonance increases sensitivity to negative affect in ordinary situations. And so it showed that they, using empathy only, faced with another's suffering then, is very much tied to or correlated with just negative feelings, pain, distress, anxiety, discouragement, because it's the same neural network that is activated when we personally feel physical pain. And they know this because, they hook people up with these imaging machines, and they can tell what part of the brain is activated when they're meditating in a certain way, and so that they can see, and they've mapped the brain enough that they know, where these pain centers are versus, feeling courageous and love and all of this. So this is very helpful to know about because all of us were hardwired to have empathy for something or someone that's suffering. And all of us have different responses. Some people can be around a human that is suffering and be fine and, show some compassion and, have empathy, then show compassion and love. Other people, if it's an animal that's suffering, they just stay in empathy. It's like, it's too much, it's just painful. And then other people, it's the reverse. Is that not true? Do you have a certain flavor of how you can get flooded and overwhelmed by someone suffering or something suffering? Yeah, so we all have our own, quality of that. Again, so what's important about that? So through meditation, to understand, how I am with, for me personally, I'm fine with humans that suffer. I was a nurse for 35 years. I saw a lot of suffering. I could work with it just fine. But you put me in front of an animal suffering, and I have such difficulty with that. I have to work really hard. Yeah. So, that's just what it is. But so I know that when I'm around an animal that's suffering, I have to activate my love and compassion. I have to consciously get that running. Yeah. Because without support of love and compassion, empathy left to itself, it's like an electric pump through which no water circulates, and it's just going to overheat and burn up. The Dalai Lama speaks to this when he says, "We must use a real individual as the focus of our meditation, and then enhance our compassion and loving kindness toward that person so that we can really experience compassion and loving kindness toward others. We work on one person at a time. Otherwise, we might end up meditating on compassion for all in a very general sense, with no specific focus or power to our meditation. So this all taps into another feature of the brain that is really helpful, the mind. The ability of the mind to imagine an experience is just as powerful as actually experiencing something. And in Buddhism, we use this ability in meditation to transform our minds in positive ways. So let me just do a quick little example of that. So close your eyes and just listen to me. So you walk into your kitchen and you sit at the table, or if it's in the dining room, wherever it is. And on that table is a cutting board, and there's a lemon on that cutting board. And so you cut the lemon in two, and then you cut that half into a fourth. And there's a lot of juice. It's very juicy lemon. And now you pick up one of those wedges of the lemon. You bring it up to your nose and smell it. And now you open your mouth and you take a big bite. Now, what did your body do? What did your mouth do? Anything? Did you have any reaction to that at all? How many had a reaction? How many didn't? Yeah. Now, if you really like lemon and you eat a lemon like that, maybe you wouldn't have a reaction, but most of us, it's quite sour. So what happens? Actually, there's more saliva in the mouth all of a sudden because we want to dilute the sour. Now, where's the lemon? There's no lemon. Look at the power of the mind. That's our imagination. That's just our imagination. So we have this very powerful tool right inside our mind that we can use. There is no difference between imagining something and actually doing it in terms of how it affects us, how it transforms us. So oftentimes we can, we use a meditation called a meditation. So it's a loving kindness meditation. So when I have a day where my mind is quite critical and I'm judgmental, it just comes, it's just ad nauseum. So what I do with that is I notice first, there's my mind, I'm judging again, Oftentimes it's like when I'm traveling, I'm in the airport and it's like, gosh, why'd she put that on? Why is she wearing that? That's curious. That's an interesting choice. Or, why is he chewing like that? Or, on and on. And so when I notice I'm doing that, then I just switch my mind and I just say, may you have happiness. May you be calm. May you have everything that you need. So I just turn the way my mind is thinking to something totally opposite. And that cuts all of that judgment, all of that criticism. You have to practice it some. First time it doesn't so much. But if you practice it some, then, it will. And then after a while, you can start feeling when that judgmental energy starts arising and automatically tap into heart, go into loving kindness, go into, heart-centered kind of living. I don't know how to say that. It's just knowing the difference between when I'm reacting to something from my heart. There's no judgment in there. The judgment's all up in here. So if when I react with my heart, no judgment. So, it's an opposing emotion, criticism and loving kindness. They're opposing. They can't both be in the mind at the same time. It's impossible. So this has been a bit of an overview. So maybe now if there's any comments or questions that have come up.
The last, I'd say, month, I've been working on metta and sending it to myself. Mm-hmm. And I've been feeling, I was doing it, and I've been feeling really good. And then I came to some kind of familiar pattern that happens with me, and I go into this cycle. I feel like I'm in a wave and I can't get out. And I'm like, I've been doing so well. And then I go into this kind of fog, and I feel like I can't get out.
And so does that, when you're in that fog, you can't really do the meditation?
Yeah, I feel like it was there and I was feeling great. And then, it goes in these really deep waves.
Yeah.
And I've been practicing for, 5 years. And I hit these familiar phases in my life.
Yeah, so that's very familiar to me. Yeah. So that is the self-centered attitude trying to get you off track. Because as we develop these qualities, starting with ourselves first, the self-centered attitude gets scared, because if we continue to develop these qualities, it will lose its job, and it doesn't want to. So it's going to sneakily, any way it can, derail us from this path of transformation. So when that comes up for me, and it'll be a different flavor for every person. For you, it's a foggy brain, or, I just talk to it. I say, oh, hi, I know you. And you're not going to get away with this. Get out of here. Yeah. And it depends on how I'm feeling. Sometimes I have to talk gently. Other times I have energy and I can say, get out of here. You're ruining this. Get out, So it just depends on kind of where you are. So and you just practice with it and see what works. Yeah. So the other thing to remember is when that starts coming up, after you've practiced for a long time, and then 5 years is a long time. That's so beautiful. But now, you get interrupted periodically. Your practice is going very well, and you have a very strong practice, or else the self-centered attitude wouldn't be activated in creating all this havoc. Yeah. So rejoice at that, actually.
So it's threatened.
It's threatened, sure. Because it wants you to only think of yourself, period, only, and not develop kindness and caring and compassion and love, all of these positive qualities. It doesn't want you to do that. But yet that's what you're wanting to do. And that's what you are doing. So it's threatened. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think if I experience that, I would have to say it's like there's a part of my mind that doesn't believe, like there's a corner of the mind that for me it might come up, I guess it would be doubt, actually.
Doubt. Yeah.
That's something that comes up for me. And so I think that if, I'm just wondering if you have this experience or how, what Venerable has helped me see is that there's like a corner of my mind that doesn't believe in like the good things I'm trying to cultivate. Maybe my ability, I think self-doubt is what comes up for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe what you're saying, that's like the different flavor that it is for a different person.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think that's kind of a different one, actually.
Okay.
Because I have both. I have when I have doubt, I don't let it get one toehold. I don't let it get one iota of space. It's like, no. I do really strong with that one. No, and that works because if a toe of doubt gets in there, it will unravel everything. Yeah, and you're miserable, and it takes a long time to build it back up, has been my experience. It's hard to recognize. Yeah, I don't recognize it in my mind, I recognize it in my body. So again, meditation really helps. You can connect with your body. I can feel doubt like what is that like? It's like an itch in the mind. Some kind of niggly thing back here for me, Yeah. Kathy? Thank you for being patient and using the mic.
Am I on? Yeah.
You're on.
So how do you know you're not supposed to think about that doubt? How do you know you're not supposed to explore that doubt that your mind is bringing up?
Yeah. Well, the Buddha helps us with this. He tells us not to. But you don't have to believe what he says. So when you follow that doubt, what happens?
Well, I get more confused.
Yes.
And I find myself spinning, not really knowing, now where am I going to go with this thought or this behavior? But then I think, well, maybe I should be thinking about this doubt. Maybe this doubt has some function for me.
Now that's self-centered mind coming in.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think. Yeah. We can have more than one thing running. That's
ringing. I can have a lot running at the
Me
same
too.
time. Yeah. Sometimes it's like my bookcase next to my bed. There's a stack. These doubts running.
Yeah. So, so trust yourself. This is where compassion comes in. So I don't have to believe what the Buddha has taught. He teaches don't follow doubt. It's like trying to, what's the analogy? Sew with a two-pointed needle. You get nowhere. That's what he says. So, I don't believe you. So I'm going to follow doubt. I get confused. The next step now is to recognize what you've learned, esteem it, honor it, respect it. And now that's part of who you are. I am a person that is not going to follow doubt because it doesn't help me. It still may arise, but I have made the determination I am not following it. And the stronger that determination, and then over time, the quicker you catch it, then it rarely arises. Then you can extinguish it, actually.
But I think it's really helpful to clarify that when you're beginning any type of spiritual path or undertaking, that if there are questions that arise because you lack clarity, that kind of doubt that Venerable Jigme is talking about that adds to the confusion and maybe you should be doing something else is one kind of doubt, but the kind of doubt that's sincerely seeking an answer to a question that you're pondering, that requires more thought, maybe more guidance, maybe more study, maybe more teachings, maybe some support. I think that doubt is a really viable place when you're first starting off or getting into a topic that's totally brand new.
Yeah, wonderful.
Because there's a willingness behind it. You don't know.
Yeah.
That's a great mind to have sometimes. I just don't know.
Yep. Very good point. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful point.
Well, I was wondering, so we need empathy, right? That kind of builds that resonance, and then we move beyond it.
We are hardwired to have empathy. Yes.
I'm wondering, when do you know? Well, for instance, I was very healthy up to a certain point, and then very unhealthy. And after my illness, my empathy or my awareness or resonance with other people who were ill was very fine-tuned. Whereas I was pretty oblivious to many things before that. So I appreciated that door opening to my awareness. But then, you don't want to overdo your empathy. So what's too little and what's too much, I guess.
Well, I would say that working on recognizing your empathy for yourself would be the first thing. Yeah. Do you have a sense of what that is? Empathy for yourself. Do you know when you're empathizing with yourself, with whatever distress or difficulties that you have? Do you know about that? Do you know what that feels like? Do you do that? Okay. And so then the next part from that is to then offer yourself some compassion and love. You know how to do that. Yeah. Okay, so then that's how you gauge it. You know what that feels like for you. Now, how you're going to gauge that for others would be very similar. You use yourself as the model, yeah.
So I've been dealing with a lot of this doubt, and to kind of pull some shade back from me, because I like to analyze things so much, and that leads to a lot of doubt. So it seems to me like when I get into those, and I want to say that, it's nice to hear things that sometimes I will wonder, am I crazy, that other people share in these struggles, because I could have been saying these things myself. But it's like a familiarity. That self-centered attitude doesn't want me to get too far, to get too familiar or too sure of anything, because it's so familiar with not being positive, and that can lead to negative feelings toward myself, which in the end is kind of, again, like you said, confirming that self that's more important than anything else. So I don't know if I did a good job of explaining that, but it's a comfortable place. And like you said in the beginning of the teaching, and our mind's been doing that since beginningless time.
Yeah. So with that one, for me, what has worked the best is to really work hard at generating some acceptance for where I am at, where my mind is doing, whatever it is, as painful as it is. So first acceptance, and then some love and some compassion for myself. And so I talk to myself, first I accept. So I say, okay, this sucks. I don't want to be in this place, but this is where I am. This is where I am. I can't be somewhere else. This is it. This is what it is right now. So I have two choices. I can be miserable about that and beat myself up about it and criticize myself. I know how to do that. What does that bring? Misery. Do I want to bring myself misery? No. And I touch my heart. No. I don't deserve that. No. So I have to activate this place here. No. I do not want to do that. So what do I know? I know in this very moment, with the information I have, the energy I have, all of my conditioning in this life and past lives, if I believe in that, and I do, in this moment, I am doing the very, very best I can. And if that isn't good enough, what the heck would be? That has to be. Because that's what I can do. So cut yourself a break, relate to yourself in a realistic manner. That's a realistic manner. Mm-hmm. And when you first start doing it, when I first started doing that, all hell broke loose, I'll tell you. My self-centered attitude pushed me off of that, and, and I just kept coming back. It's like, that's why we say we swim upstream here a lot. We go against what we're used to. And the more you do it, the stronger you get, and the more you change. And we're all worth that, because we all have the potential to change anything internally, every one of us.
To add a little bit to Matt's pondering is that there's something about this kind of diluted doubt that really keeps us from getting to a place where our deep spiritual yearnings can really take root. There's a kind of restlessness sometimes with doubt that if I were to put these doubts aside and at peace and figure them out, I could really move. Like there's a familiarity. As long as I'm doubting myself, my self-confidence, my self-worth, my ability to stand truly in my own life, never get a chance to find their place. Because what I heard is that, at least from what I thought I heard you say, is that the doubt, you said something like it keeps you from knowing yourself, or it keeps you from living your life or having a kind of foundation. Maybe I misheard what you were saying, but it was getting into the way of something you really wanted for yourself. And that it became sort of a hijacking mechanism for Matt to really have a life that had purpose, a life that had meaning, a life that had joy. It was like a habit almost of some sort. And what Venerable Jigme is saying, man, number one is just take it right there. But I think sometimes doubt can be a real more of a mental habit, like the fogginess, or like the, it's just a habit. And to challenge it, because boy, it gets in the way of a lot of joy. A lot of clarity, too.
And we can approach it two different ways. I can either train myself to catch it when it arises, or I can set an intention every day, or a motivation every day, or many times a day, that I am not going to go in that direction. I trust myself. I'm not going to doubt, for example. I'm going to work with what I have today, and it's going to be enough. I'm not going to get lazy. I'm going to keep going forward, but today, this is what I'm working with, and it's enough. Because every day is different, isn't it? Some days I wake up and I'm grouchy in my mind, and I don't even know why. Well, that's not the day I'm going to, do a lot of external things. I'm going to work internally. I'm going to be kind to myself, and I'm going to slow down, and I'm not going to take on so much. I'm going to take 5 or 6 things off my list, and I'm going to manage what's going on internally. That's compassion. Because if I don't do it, who's going to? No one. And if I don't do it, what's the result? Harm. Harm. To myself and others, harm comes. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I have kind of realized about myself is my ability to gaslight myself, like gaslamping, the idea, turn down the lights a little bit, especially in relationships, and you start questioning your reality. Uh-huh. And talking about this sort of doubt, I find that I do that to myself a lot, especially with what I'm feeling or my emotions. And I have found, I guess what works for me almost is sort of taking that refuge, uh-huh. In the, the 3 jewels, where I do know, and I do believe this is actually how it is. And I can sort of try to find some sort of teaching that says okay, get out of your head. This is actually how it goes, how it is. And like you said, sort of the self-grasping and ignorance and things like that. So I have found for me that oftentimes helps to sort of set the record straight
Yep.
and turn the light back on.
Yeah. Nice.
Internally.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah. 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 So using what you do know of the Buddhist teachings and what resonates, and that you've taken strong determination to follow this path, sounds like. So that's what you're going to turn to. That's what's going to help you. That's your refuge. Yeah. 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 Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Kathy?
I don't mean to keep going on, but I just want to clear my head a little bit about this. I don't want to have any doubts here. So some of the things we're saying is that doubt then becomes an obstruction that you then get attached to, that keeps you maybe from transforming and moving forward. Would that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Your variety of doubt sounded like mine a little bit to me, because something you said, and it reminds me of some years ago when I was kind of working this out. And I'm not too articulate about a lot of this, but this part I get is that I remember clearly like saying to myself, well, maybe 1 in 247 times it might be useful to make that analysis. But all the other times were like a dead end. And it took me, once I realized that, so now it's quite quick for me. As soon as I realize I'm having doubt, the next thought is so strong, like this is a dead end.
Yeah.
And I can actually drop it now.
Yeah.
My
Nice.
more problem is sometimes recognize it, and that would be the part I would have a hard time even articulating in a way. I'm better with the results.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm stuck and it's a dead end and my mind's doing kind of spinning around, trying to come up with something that's about as close as I could articulate what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm pretty good once I know that's it. And then because it's been such a dead end, but I remember I was at this place earlier where, well, sometimes I figure something out. Yeah, and I thought about it, and I realized, like every 247 times, and all those times I've wasted. Well, it took me, I don't do that anymore. I'm quite clear that this mind is a habit, and it never gets me anywhere. And once I'm there, once I can label it, then I'm just able to drop it, because that's quite clear to me.
And I think too, if we think about it in a neuroscience way, I have this habit of thinking a certain way, and it lays down this pathway in my mind. And when certain conditions come about, it fires, and then that's where it goes. And it's why it's so hard to turn that is because it's so deep. It's such a neural pathway. But all of the Buddhist teachings in mind training give us different techniques to turn that mind. And we just have to know what the process is. I turn it, or I apply this method, this antidote is what we call them, and the doubt doesn't go away, it's still there. But I apply it, and then I apply it. And then I apply it. And sometimes ad nauseum, I'm implying it. And it doesn't go away. It comes again, it comes again, it comes again. But over time, its strength diminishes. And then pretty soon, I can start feeling when it starts to arise. And my resolve to not go there is very strong. Now, what is that? That's the new neural pathway that I've created. So it's just habituation and familiarization, over and over again. And so if we don't have very much compassion for ourselves, it's hard for us to do that work, because instead we get sidetracked with criticizing ourselves. I should know better, or what am I doing that again for, or whatever. So that's why compassion is so important, that we have to relate to ourselves kindly. That's the first thing. Otherwise, we won't be able to use these methods that work very well. Huh?
In terms of working on one thought, like doubt, that we're exploring, from what I hear from the teachings, it's good, and from some experiences, that it's recommended to work on say, like this doubt, and how you mentioned how to minimize its force by applying antidotes, becoming conscious of it, identifying it, mindfulness, etc. That in terms of us trying to figure out our work and studying and practicing, and there's a lot of stuff, that focusing on one thing like doubt as a thought over many months, perhaps years, but that we need to be a little bit organized in our work. So this doubt is very significant, it can be very consuming in a big obstruction to our path, or even having faith and confidence in our path, that it's a good thing to work on, eventually minimize. But I guess my question is it with other Sangha members, do they often focus on working on specific negative sentiments or attitudes, and just pick one rather than try to have many and work on them all day? It seems like picking one is picking one over a few months or years, depending on the grace of how fast we move, that's a better way of doing it, rather than trying to catch a lot of various negative impulses and feelings and trying to eliminate them. It's better to focus on one. I was wondering about any thoughts about, or how the monastics here may practice that. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a process. So first, if you're new to Buddhism, you have to learn about what Buddhism is. That's the first thing. So there's a lot of bringing information in. At that point, when I did that, I wasn't doing anything with my mind other than filling it up with new information. Then after a while, and the after a while has everything to do with meditation. The more that you can sit and calm your mind and work with your mind, the calmer the mind gets, the more you can start working with it. Then I think the instruction often is, you could start with the thing that brings you the most misery or is the strongest. Yeah. And that's interesting, because when you start working with that, you also get to see where your level of compassion is. Because the thing that gives you the most difficulty often is the thing that you're the most critical about. So that was the case for me, anyhow. So then I kept trying to work on this, but I was doing it by beating myself up all the time. And I got nowhere. It took some years, frankly, to get myself in a place where I understood what I was doing, so I instead turned my focus to some compassion for myself and acceptance. Then when I went back to that, it was quite easy to move it. Yeah. So, every mind is so different. And again, I cannot do this alone because it's too complicated. I have to have a teacher to help me. So that's the next thing too, to think about who could help you with figuring this out. Because my self-centered attitude is so sneaky. If I try to do it by myself, I will just get back to the same thing I've been doing over and over again. It'll have a little different flavor, but I'll be just doing the same thing. I won't get spinning my wheels is what it always reminds me of, So, so this is quite a process. So we have to be patient, and we have to be very gentle and kind with ourselves as we roll this out. The first thing is that we read about Buddhism, and then it bumps against whatever spiritual tradition we were raised with. So we have to work with that first, So it's complicated, and it takes some time. Yeah. So I don't know. Did that help at all?
Definitely, I understand. It's a very subtle process. It's very multidimensional.
Yeah.
Gradual, and it's not always black and white.
Yep.
Like, I will I will work on my lust for 3 months, and then I'm going to minimize it, eliminate it, and then I'm going to work on pride for 3 months, and then that's going to be eliminated. And
Yeah, no.
gradually, Buddha nature will become 100%.
Yeah, that's the fantasy novel version, I think, which we all love. But yeah. Yeah. So I think we'll stop for now. We've used our time almost.